Welcome to ABA on Tap, where our goal is to find the best recipe to brew the smoothest, coldest, and best tasting ABA around. I'm Dan Lowry with Mike Rubio, and join us on our journey as we look back into the ingredients to form the best concoction of ABA on tap. In this podcast, we will talk about the history of the ABA brew, how much to consume to achieve the optimum buzz while not getting too drunk, and the recommended pairings to bring to the table. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and always analyze responsibly.
All right. Welcome back to ABA on Tap. I am your co-host, Mike Rubio, and this is part 2 with Dr. Scott O'Donnell. Enjoy. Wow. Maybe not with charting, but I'm sure. I think I do. Contingency analysis on just about everything.
Yeah, I think I do lax behavior analysis, where I think about things, I conceptualize it, but I don't actually chart it.
Yeah, I know that not everybody charts it, and I know that sometimes people they'll see this scary standard acceleration chart, and they'll say, "Oh my gosh, it's so scary," and they'll say, "Oh, I can't do it," even though there are 8-year-olds that can't read at the Morningside Academy that are using standard acceleration charts every single day. So you guys have no excuse for that.
But, we don't.
There's some block that people have to math, and that I think standard acceleration charts fall into that. People just shut down when it comes to math. Go ahead.
Sounds fancy.
What math? It's just dots on a piece of paper. I don't know. So
Yep.
You guys think it's
You're
something
right.
else. I don't know what you guys are thinking, but I just
I don't know either. I just stayed
love
away.
them. I love them because after you put the dot, you don't have to write a number, right? So I'm just putting a dot, right? It only takes a second to do, and then you're graphing. You're graphing at the same time you're recording data. Right. So
Okay.
it's kind of you don't have to do anything else except analyze it after that point. But I know my big thing is, hey, if we're going to use this with clients, we have to be willing to use it on ourselves.
ABA on Tap is recorded live and unfiltered.
Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
But I was saying, how can we use this on our clients if we're not willing to use these things on ourselves?
That's a great question. You've convinced me. I'm going to have to find something to chart, something to track.
Especially if we say, if you're not taking data, you're not doing ABA.
Right.
Well, actually, I wonder with the name of the show, I do record my alcohol intake, and I wonder if it's going to increase with being on ABA on Tap. But we'll see. I do have a good amount of baseline data here, right? So we'll see if there's an increase. I could just mark that
Alcohol
down.
intake. That's going to be my thing. That's where I'm going to start. Right there. That'll be something very good for me to track. Yes, sir.
I just record the number of drinks I have a day. It's really easy to track on standard.
What's your sauce? What do you like, sir?
Oh, I do like beer.
Okay,
I do like beer. Probably, but that's why I'm tracking it, because I probably like beer too much. Me and bourbon. We have a really, really friendly relationship. And almost too friendly, not to be too worried about me, but the idea is I've been sitting here and I've just enjoyed a lot. I need to track this stuff. You need a chart too.
You got me. That's where I'm going to start applying this to myself for sure. So really quickly, you would think, and I've written some of the show descriptions. I don't know if you've caught them. We do take this whole brewing beer element to it. Dan's not a beer drinker. I will certainly enjoy beer. It came out of sort of a parent education session where this dad was like, "Man, you guys serve up a good brew. If you guys do a podcast, you should call it ABA on Tap." And we were like, "That's a great idea. We're going to run with it."
Yeah.
Now we do.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, no, we're hoping to, and you would have been a perfect guest for this. As we talk to advertisers and show sponsors, we're really hoping that we can hook up with somebody that might be able to deliver preferred libation to our guest, as well as then have one ourselves, and spend a couple hours enjoying a drink and chatting, and that'd be a nice touch to it. So hopefully the next time you come around, we'll have that up and ready.
Well, my thinking was that you guys were gonna brew your own, and then there's going to be like a special
I mean,
ABA on tap brew, because like what do you need to do it, like a bathtub, right? And
I mean,
something
as
like
long as
that.
people are willing to drink it and we don't, kill anybody, I think we're
Okay.
okay.
Okay. So if you do, you just send me some.
So we've thought about this, man. We've thought about this again in terms of show sponsors. The idea at conferences, we got to moderate. Shout out to Jennifer, who invited us to do some moderating at the Clinical Practice and ABA conference. This in October of 2024.
Oh yeah, I was in that. Yeah, I was in
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
That was
yeah.
great.
And we were thinking about that, man. If we get these opportunities, how cool would it be to host, ABA on tap happy hours at these conferences where we do hit up some local brewery wherever the conference is at, and
I
buy
like
a
it.
keg and label it with our stuff or whatever, and yeah, it'd be fun. So these are all show ideas that are brewing. Hopefully, we'll get to that at some point because it would be fun to add that element. I mean, again, these have become very comfortable conversations. So you add a nice libation, alcoholic or not, whatever people prefer. I think that'd be a good touch for the future.
So I also will track how much listening to, like, reading and writing about it
Oh
and
wow.
listening to behavior analysis. So just to give you an idea, right? So one of these dots is you guys, me
Oh
listening to
wow.
you guys, right? Actually, I'm sure several of these dots were. Several of these dots are me listening to you guys. So
Well,
so I'm
thank you, sir.
using ABA to listen to your show.
ABA on tap.
We appreciate that. And how would that look? What would that look like actually? I mean, we're able to see it, but most of the people that are listening are just listening, not able to visualize that. Can you explain how you would represent that on a standard acceleration chart?
Oh, it's a bunch of dots. Just a bunch of dots on a chart, right? And when there's a lot of dots on the chart, that means that there's a lot of behavior going on.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what that means. So, but isn't, like, I just thought that was cool. Like, I thought about
Thank
that.
you,
Like,
man.
wait a
Love it.
second. No, I'm writing down how much I'm listening to their show. So, and I think that the last dot on there was definitely, or the last, like, probably two or three, since, like, I got to hear the rest of the Matt Story,
Yeah.
episode. Like, that was me listening to that. So I track that too. But
We appreciate that.
I also track, like, um, billiards. That's something I've been doing
Yeah.
recently because I like to play pool, and I want to get better. And and like, anytime there's something you want to get better at, you just use ABA and you make yourself better at it. Um, but it's not all on a standard acceleration chart. Like, I realize I can't put it all there, so there's like other sheets I'm using. And I found I've done a few things. I've done, like, tried to look for fluency, how quickly I could run a rack or go through all the balls in a rack and stuff like that, how long that takes, how many turns it takes and stuff like that. And they
Yeah.
seem to be closely related, so I'm not sure how much the fluency is going to make a difference. But I think, like, well, just like get into these variables, because I haven't seen any articles on ABA and billiards out there. I don't know if you guys have, like, seen anything like that.
No, no, sir. But we'll be looking for yours.
Oh, you're thinking, well, like, well, I would have to do a whole study with the IRB and everything before I could do that, just like I did with the golf, though.
Yeah,
But
yeah. It might be worth it. It gets you playing a lot of billiards.
yeah, well, you know what? I'd be doing that anyway, but I want to get better
Might
at
as well get paid and research for it.
I want to get better at it. Like,
There you go.
see,
That's good.
you guys are thinking, like, oh yeah, you could publish and make it, like, let everybody else out. No, 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 no. I want to get better at billiards. I'm not trying to make everybody else better right now. Let me use ABA to make myself
Myself
better.
better.
Then, like, we'll see if I get really, 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 really good. Right? I'm already really good, but if it really, really works well, maybe I'll share it with everybody else. But there's no reason why I can't just use this on myself to make myself better in whatever way.
ESPN billiards analyst.
Well,
there's a lot of room
I used
here.
to listen to Rogan a lot, and I know Rogan would talk a lot about billiards, and
yeah.
he would talk about how a lot of the money is in, like, the underground billiards hustling,
Yeah.
like arena. So maybe you get really good and nobody knows about it. And I'm sure there's some games in Philly where there's a fair amount of money exchanging hands. So there you go.
Yeah, I don't play for money. They never pay. Like, I'm in and they don't pay. So there's that whole
There's
part
always
of it.
some
You gotta
excuse.
go. You got to go around with, like, a bouncer or something like that if you're really going to do that. And it's like, then you're paying someone. It's not really worth
Well,
it.
That's a
you
lot
said
of
you got
work.
some Jersey connections. Maybe there's some, Italian Jersey connections that if people don't pay, you could have them make a visit.
Yeah, we don't have to go down. We don't have to go to Jersey.
That's
for the
true.
Italian. We just go right down. We go right down to South Philly. All right, they're still there. We have the Italian market and everything. That's where they all. That's where they all lived. And then before they moved to Jersey, like
Oh, that's
so.
right.
So you make a trip to South Philly. You let people know you got some debts that need to be settled.
Hey, I'm free and clear. All right. Like, see, you're talking about this, but you don't understand. Like, my mom's family, like that. Yeah. So like, but like, I don't owe any favors. They don't owe me any
Good,
favors. We're
good, man. That's the way to be.
I have a question. So going back to the clinic that you work at, is it people that just walk in, like is it like a walk-in clinic? People are experiencing whatever? Is it people that have been pre-screened and they have been kind of referred to you? How do you get your clientele at you said your main job, I think you called it, or your full-time job?
Yeah, it's people who are like have contacted their insurance company or on medical assistance, and they're looking,
Okay.
looking for outpatient therapies. It's all outpatient, stuff, which is good, because you don't have to deal so much with the psychiatric stuff. Although we do have a psychiatrist working there too, prescribing meds and stuff like that. But it's all outpatient work, different than what you guys are. But I'm wondering if what you guys do, if that's going to, start looking closer to this, like an hour a week. You don't know. I know you guys get like 40 hours a week if you want. But that might change soon. And if you look at like OT and speech, they don't get like 40 hours a week. So I don't know how sustainable that's going to be. I imagine that's part of the field, part of the growth of this field is going to be like,
Yep.
yeah, we're going to have to shed some hours like down a lot,
We've been fighting against the 40 hours a week as much as
Yeah.
that's been blasphemy.
I think our mindset is
Wow.
we're fortunate to have had the mindset to start meeting clients at their availability, not necessarily making recommendations fully based on their availability. I don't know if that makes any sense, but there's a lot of what should I call these? I want to be respectful. There's a lot of cool excuses you can make in terms of pointing back to research and saying you either get this level of service or we can't serve you at all. And it's an interesting premise. I don't want to say anything more about it. But luckily for us, I think, fortunately, to your point, we've gotten very accustomed to saying, okay, this is our recommendation. What are you actually able to access as a family? What other services does the child have? And then we'll go from there. So as much as it's much more difficult to not fit everything into a nice block schedule or something that's already predetermined, we just think it works better. And it is more of a struggle, and it is going to change our pace. But maybe to your point, it'll leave us a little more prepared for that change.
Yeah, maybe making the most of your time with the client. It could be like
Right.
that could be important too, and just
That's it.
having more, I mean, Dan, you were talking about DTT and stuff like that, and I know I've seen studies that say the amount of learning trials is similar, but I
It's
think
true.
that's BS. There's no way. There's no anyone who's done DTT and naturalistic,
Yep.
training too at the same time realizes no, the naturalistic training, it takes more time, and you have to get set up and you have to think ahead and
Yeah.
kind of have an idea of what's going to happen on in that learning in that and it's unstructured, where in DTT you get a client working on it and it could be, I mean, they could go pretty quick.
Yep.
I've seen clients who really do well with
Yeah,
DTT, and
sure.
they just, hey, if you're creating two situations, here's one, here, come sit at this table and do a bunch of learning trials with me and get a bunch of reinforcement, versus like go over there and not, or play with your toy, but you don't really play because you just kind of like stand there and clap your hands or stim or whatever. Like I think they're going to enjoy the table a lot more, because it's just more enriching. And that, from my experience, that's what they do, is as long as you make it like enriching and enjoyable for them. I think that's the most important point.
Yeah.
Reinforcing.
I think there was an interesting, I don't want to say falsehood about trials, because again, Lovaas proved that ABA worked, and Lovaas model originally was a lot of DTT. That, I mean, just looking at it compared to naturalistic intervention, I don't know if it's necessarily the amount of trials, but I think it's the amount of attention to the trials. Because, like, say somebody at DTT that doesn't really want to be at the table, and like you said, it should be enriching, but a lot of times historically it wasn't, right? It was this barren room with this one reinforcer and a whole bunch of stimuli. Let's say somebody pays attention to 40% of the trials, versus naturalistic intervention, they pay attention to 80% of the trials. well, we only have to run half the trials, so it's not necessarily the amount of trials that need to be presented, it's the amount of trials of which they have attention to, that need, or you talked about MOs, are motivated to pay attention to. So I think we kind of got this misattribution of like individuals with autism, they need a whole bunch of trials. Well, no, they're just not attentive because we haven't enriched the environment enough to help them gauge attention. So if we can start like you do with joint attention or getting their buy-in, then maybe we can actually present less trials because the ones that we do, they're going to be attentive to.
Yeah, I think that's the important difference that you're both delineating, and we agree the idea that you've got that setup, that traditional setup, table and chair, and you've got a kiddo who's bought in, and you've got this nice quick flow drill. Of course, that's perfect. And then the other question being, when you haven't established that, then what's your next move to be able to get to that? And I think there's a lot of errors that can be made along the way there, and in an effort to sort of replicate the optics. This looks really good. We look like we're in control, but somehow that there's no reciprocity to that level of instructional control. Meaning, I'm prompting somebody through it, and I think we've come a long way. So again, we started this. When we started this podcast, we were on our soapbox about like, man, I can't believe people are still doing some of this, RBTs coming to us from other companies with a certain amount of training, and then we would get into the training situation with them and being like, wait, this is what you've been doing? Okay, this is interesting, because there's no way to pivot, there's no way to shift. You're just kind of bulldozing in this linear, fashion, and you're missing a lot of cues. So I think you make a really good point, Dr. Scott. The idea that we don't want to discount anything about DTT other than the errors that we can make in its implementation.
Sure.
The idea of presenting trials, presenting some sort of SD towards some response that can be differentially reinforced. I think that, doing that, rinse and repeat, that is the basic recipe, whether the child is sitting at the table, standing, whatever the case may be. We can't throw that out. And then there's the notion of, are we trying too hard to replicate this? Again, back to the lab to living room thing. Are we trying so hard to replicate this without the experimental control that it's actually being rendered useless?
Well, that's, when you're in a clinical spot and all these different things, like a real good clinician, the best ones can bounce between one to the next and
Yes, sir.
use whatever, like, because you'll be doing DTT 1 minute and then TT the next minute, and just because you see that opportunity and you see, you can train them. So even the best ones. But I think when we talk about DTT, we can't, we have to specify, and especially when we talk about Lovaas, that nobody's doing what Lovaas did.
Great
Back
point.
then, we just, even if we say we're doing DTT, it's not what Lovaas did back then. You're talking about like he was slapping their legs when they were
Right.
stimming, and would not continue on with the trial until they stopped stimming and started making eye contact. I don't even think we're requiring eye contact anymore with DTT, and we're still running trials. So it's not the same thing. And even when you're thinking about that, well, that means that it might have included a lot of punishment, positive punishment too. So then you're talking about completely different schedules of reinforcement. So it's really not the same thing.
No,
Even though
that's
we
great.
call it DTT, this isn't Lovaas method.
That's
whatever.
a great point.
However you cut it, it's not the same.
No, that's an excellent point. You make me think of something in terms of the evolution of systems and procedures, and maybe what your thought is about this. And I haven't found a good way to explain this yet. Hopefully I can do okay here. But the notion that if we get into Lovaas's head and his motives, we go back to late 60s, and he's starting his project at UCLA. And these are now individuals who, by age 13, as childhood schizophrenics, which was, I think, the general term back then, they're going to be institutionalized. This is where we're going. We've got some political movements at the same time in terms of civil rights. Now you've got this researcher who says, I don't know the many hypotheses he had, but the idea that there is this demographic of the population, and I think I've got techniques and systems and strategies that can apply to them, that can apply learning theory, as it were, pretty basic learning theory, in a way that hasn't been done before. And I'm not supporting any of the things that we can look at now, in terms of maybe punishment procedures or things that were applied. I wouldn't look at them now and say, yeah, we should try those outside of maybe very specific situations where they might still apply. But we could be remiss in thinking about some of those things as bad. I think our culture, our society is dealing with a lot of this, even though maybe at that point in time it was necessary to propel us forward. And then it's up to us to evolve beyond those things. So I'd be hard pressed to think of a situation where I might slap a child's leg at this point. However, I know that it served a purpose back at that time. I don't know. I don't know if I made any sense there. If you have any thoughts on that, I think that we get into a lot of trouble. Well, let's just say this. There's a lot of discussion about the idea of compassionate ABA. I know what people mean. I'm not going to be critical about it. At the same time, shout out to CJ, our colleague, he would come back and say, well, what have you been doing? Have you not been compassionate? What does that mean? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I threw a lot out there.
Yeah. And this has been, this was a topic in the ethics class
That's
too,
right.
because we're talking to the next generation about the some main topics that are going on now, which is like, yeah, the shift in ABA to be more compassionate. And I agree with you. Like if you take something someone did out of historical context and compare it to what the values and the culture is today, then they will often look like, a real bad guy. But that doesn't matter. It could be anyone. Like one of my heroes is Ben Franklin. And guess who also used to put dots on a piece of paper? Ben Ben Franklin used to do that too. So, so like I see him as the first behaviors, but like I also know that he was like really racist, but he knew he was really racist too, which is kind of interesting that he like recognized his own bias. And he would even say like, how I am now is not going to be viewed, that great in the future, which makes me think,
Wow.
what are the things that we are doing now where people are going to
100%.
look back to us and say like, ew, like that is just gross that these people would do that. I think it probably has a lot to do with like what we're doing to the earth around us. I think that people will probably look back and say like, oh, you're throwing things out, like, oh, you're like such a wasteful. So you used a paper plate and the paper cup, like, like that's gross. You know what I mean? And like, but now it's like common, but we've got no problem doing it now. Yeah, paper plates and plastic cups. Some people are moving on, but people still use them even when they're convenient, and we're not stuck on like, like using regular dishes and stuff like that. Although we should, hey, we have this system in which we can renew those sources. We could use a cup and we could use a dish from like our actual cup and dish instead of a paper cup and a dish. We abandon this behavior for something that is more convenient for us to lower the response effort. We've adopted using these methods, and yeah, it's immediately rewarding because it lowers the response effort. But look at the delayed, cost. It's like it's ruining the environment. We're like killing the world, and we're using our resources too fast. And plus, it's just wasteful. You know what I mean? We're using like a paper cup and a paper plate just to walk, 10 feet and sit down and eat something and then throw it out. It's like really kind of wasteful. I don't know, but I might have went kind of a long way on that one.
No,
A
no.
little bit of a tangent.
I think
Makes
it
a lot of
applies
sense,
again.
yeah.
Response effort is what you were talking about, and I think that applies here very easily when we think about, just trying to shoot for compliance, for example. Which, whatever. There's, pretty minimal value. Yes, there's very clear, but pretty minimal value overall. The idea of compliance. You don't want that to be the overall effort. But it can be very easy, especially if you're working with a young kid and that crying is going away very easily, and you're not considering the value of or the type of reinforcement that you're using. I think people can make a big mess of things based on that more minimal response effort along with the negative reinforcement, because you're not getting that distress signal that you're having to deal with. And it's a lot harder to work through that and to integrate the aspects of self-soothing and to all the verbal elements that might go into that situation. When it's 30 minutes of your child crying and it's the end of the day and you're tired and they already didn't have dinner, and people are going to do some interesting things, and young professionals are going to do some interesting things, just in an effort to make everybody feel better. That's not a bad motive. And then for us as behavior analysts, there's a lot to examine there to make sure that from a treatment perspective, for example, we're addressing those variables.
I've also pushed. I know you guys have done it. Well, if you've been in the field long enough, you've done it. Like, where you rode the wave and pushed through the extinction burst and like, just did a blanket extinction procedure. Like, you can't tell me you didn't do it. I'm sure you did it at some point.
100%.
Like,
We
I
love
know.
talking about it here. The blanket, the extinction means blanket ignoring
Yep.
equation. That's we
Yeah.
love. Yeah, we love that discussion.
Yeah. Like I also noticed, like, especially when I started working with more verbal clients, like being ignored, they don't like that. Like, so it's kind of
Wait,
aversive.
really?
In fact, I don't know anyone who likes being ignored.
Dan,
So,
Dan does.
My girlfriend does.
My,
Or my partner. Yep.
yeah, maybe at certain times it's like leave me alone thing, but more of yeah, but being ignored, that's generally like not a good thing, and if we have alternatives to that, that's great. But I ultimately, like, I've seen behavior analysis to be the compassionate science just because of our single subject approaches that we take,
yeah.
that we do treat people.
Wow.
And like, I think this is like speaks a lot to like DEI initiatives too, that we see individuals and individuals. Like, we don't have to put people in boxes to treat or anything like that. We can measure their own behavior and compare it to like what happens after the intervention, and then and still be able to like have procedures and methods that can help them, that we can try. So different options, for procedures, or different kinds of procedures and stuff like that. So I think that we've always been compassionate. We've always tried to be compassionate. But if you're going to look back and say like,
Yeah.
oh, this is what we did back then, well, it's just because we didn't know better. We're still trying to do the best for that client that we could possibly do, and we're just, now we have better procedures. Same with modern medicine. Like, modern medicine used to, like, what, bleed people. They used to cut your arm and make you bleed into like a container or something like that. But
The
they have better
frontal
methods
lobotomy is
now.
my favorite example of that.
Oh yeah, the frontal
Yeah,
lobotomy.
that was our best idea at that time, and it worked. It worked. It was
Hmm.
awful, and it took care of a whole lot of other things that you didn't want to address. But at that point in time, it worked. It's that's my
Yeah,
favorite
right.
example
It
there
was
of a blunt
effective.
force. Yeah,
Yeah.
it met the
And,
objective.
Scott, or Dr. Scott, excuse me. Let me ask you a question about that. That was really enlightening. ABA is compassionate from the single subject design.
Good phrase.
I'm gonna let that marinate a little bit because I think,
Yeah.
wow, that's very very insightful. One thing that I've trained a lot on, and please educate me on this because I don't have the clinical experience that you have, is this concept of circular reasoning, and you made me think about it with the single subject design piece, just testing somebody against themselves. You work with individuals that may be diagnosed with schizophrenia, and from an ABA perspective or a behaviorist perspective, a lot of times I feel like that diagnosis, we look at it as circular. The person has delusions and therefore they get a diagnosis of schizophrenia. And why do they have the diagnosis of schizophrenia? Because they have delusions. So that becomes circular. Um,
oh.
what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel that diagnostic having diagnoses benefits the individual, or do you feel like because in ABA we kind of stay away from diagnoses?
Yeah, the
What are your
diagnosis. Yeah,
thoughts on that?
yeah, and I guess, like, I guess it's not gonna. My thoughts on the diagnosis isn't gonna vibe real well, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are self-diagnosing themselves,
Okay.
which I would say, like, if you're giving yourself a diagnosis, then you don't need a diagnosis.
That makes sense.
Like, yeah, and I see a diagnosis as a way to get help, not like as like, hey, this explains, my behavior, this will help make sense. But the other thing is, like, when you're exposed to all the different diagnoses outside of autism, you realize there's a lot of other issues there, and it kind of makes sense. I know a lot of people have been saying like, oh, autism clinics should be able to diagnose autism. Well, like, when I first started working, I had that DSM. When I first started working in mental health, I had the DSM, and that really helped me, because every time someone would come in, the only two things I would really know are ADHD and autism. So I wouldn't really know. I didn't. I would think everybody had ADHD and autism when they didn't. And I'm like, well, this doesn't fit, but that's all I know. But, like, yeah, then you have this whole book, and the book can be kind of broken down like behaviorally too. But it is a different perspective, even with some of the clients, specifically like schizophrenia. And I guess, like, how familiar are you guys with relational frame theory? Is that like a big thing for you guys?
Very little, but
Oh
we're
man.
gonna have you.
Please
Please,
talk.
the floor is yours, sir.
Well, I can't get into relational frame theory, but I will talk about like how clients with schizophrenia are over relating
Okay.
to things, right? And I guess relational frame theory, people think it's like neo-Skinnerian or is different, but it's like really, it needs behavior analysis, and behavior analysis needs relational frame theory. And if you think about it, even like the behavioral contingency is like you're responding to the relation between the stimuli.
Right.
You're not responding to one stimulus in particular, but you're responding to how that stimulus relates to reinforcement or relates to punishment. So like even our conceptualization of the behavioral contingency, the ABC,
Yeah.
is like is relational responding, but it's significant, especially with individuals who are verbal, and it's all about like rule governed behavior. We can act in a way, according to something, or we can act oppositional to something, or we can act, towards things. We could place them in a hierarchy. There's all kinds of different ways we can respond to these relations between things. They're all arbitrary ways, and we can respond arbitrarily to the arbitrary ways that we respond, arbitrarily. So
Yeah.
we have this special ability as humans to be able to arbitrarily respond in arbitrary ways to arbitrary stimuli that we assign arbitrary meanings to. And that's what makes us special, that we can do this to an infinite extent. And I would say that people with schizophrenia like have this problem where they overrelate things,
Mm.
where they see things that like an inanimate object as being meaningful, or as having some causative issues. Like I have a client that has schizophrenia that, I've been with him for a while, which is good, because if you get a client with schizophrenia, keeping them for a while is like, important. You want to keep them on their meds, and
Mm.
that's like an important part. Otherwise, if they go off their meds, they can have like a lot of challenges. But I realized, like as we were talking earlier, is it my goal to have him not tell me about his hallucinations? And I would say, like, no. When he has hallucinations and he has delusions, I do want to hear about them. I need to know if these things are happening and how he's like approaching them. But that also, like that, like, hey, you might see this thing. You might see three twigs on the ground in a certain, and you might see that as an arrow that points to a certain direction, and you might think that meant for you, right? But it's not, right? This is just three twigs on the ground. It's just they're not really pointing in a certain direction, and these are inanimate objects that like don't really have any meaning, but they see meaning in it, which is really interesting. That like it's so the behavioral conceptualization of it is still like is very pertinent. It's very important, because like you can kind of understand that, hey, these are things that you see as like related to contingencies, like as you're creating discriminative stimuli that aren't
Mm.
necessarily discriminative stimuli.
Interesting. Interesting.
The term is entailment. Is that the? Am I getting that right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Something like that. I don't know. Is
Okay.
that's the
I
psychological term or
entanglement is
something
all.
like that?
I always mix it up with that.
That's
But no.
Will Smith and Jada. That's the
Is that
entanglement.
okay? Is that,
Another
is
Philly
that what that is?
reference.
Wow.
That's
Yeah,
when you get
you
your
reached
son.
far for
Anyway.
that one. Anyway, yeah. I wanted to go back to something you mentioned that's very important. For a little while, I tried to traipse into the idea of neuropsychopharmacology with a lot of our clients, because a lot of them are on meds, and because they're being administered largely by their parents. And I would hear about these, med vacations, and going, did you check with your doctor on that? Is that what you should be doing? And I thought it was something that maybe we could help with, and we did in some cases in terms of tracking data and phase change
Mhm.
lines when there was changes, and anything that we could
Right,
contribute.
yeah.
It was it was
That's the
really
way I would do
cumbersome.
it.
Yeah, it was really cumbersome to try and then collaborate with the medical practitioners for various reasons. They're busy, and we get it. Could you talk a little bit? I mean, that's got to be hugely important. You just alluded to that with the population that you serve. Give us a general overview on that, and where behavior analysis comes in there. I've always liked to say, sure, once the chemical compound's in your body, that's physiological, but the act of taking that pill and putting it in your mouth and swallowing it down, I'm going to call that behavioral. That
Hmm.
we have to be involved in that to some capacity. Obviously, it's imperative, or it's crucial to your work. Tell us a little bit about that and how you get involved.
Yeah, and if there is any room for like a motivating operation or something like that, I would say this would probably be the time when you are talking about a medication that like results in like potentiating different reinforcers.
Interesting.
Because that's really kind of what we're talking about, and the different meds do different things. And like in my clients, I do realize that, some of them need meds and some of them don't have meds and some of them aren't on meds. So I'm fine either way. I do like try to, track that as best as I can when they start a med, and just tell them like educate them, because I realize they don't have that much time with the psychiatrist, where we have therapy, that like you'll see me for therapy. They're just doing, how's your med? Is it working for you? Can I refill it? Do we need to make a change? Like that's their main things. So like understanding how it works and stuff like that, we'll talk about.
Mm.
But I guess you guys, I guess like you probably like would like what, shade an area of the data sheet to say like, oh, the medication was taken at this time, and then like you shade that area down to its half-life or something like that, so the active
Ooh.
amount of the. Oh
I've
yeah,
never
you've
gotten
done
that
that, yeah.
involved, just as much as like maybe change in dosage, change in the
Yeah.
type of medication.
Phase
But
change lines.
you just gave me a whole new. I mean, that'd be interesting. That's certainly something that we deal with, more qualitatively, and I can see it with a lot of the kiddos I work with, where and it could be a false attribution a lot of the times, but a lot of the times I feel like, yeah, I'm coming in, it's after school, and your mom probably forgot your second dose. Hey, mom. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Okay. You start seeing certain things, and yeah, I think we could probably use that data if I could find a good way to start tracking it. You just gave me some good starting points.
Yeah, you would like shade it down to half-life and then go to a gradient after that, because you
Yeah.
would expect like, hey, the medication's going to peak at some time, and the effects are going to start wearing off. So you could probably look at that too and not have it like, all right, instead of like a block of orange or something like that.
Mm,
I remember doing this before, and this is what I was taught about behavioral, psychopharmacology,
yeah.
during my PhD. Um, but other than that, I do tell clients, the ones that are take a depression med, like we do talk about like what NCR and like is in related to it. Like, hey, this is it might make you feel better. It's not going to change the things around you,
Mm,
so they're not going to change. But, I realize that if I'm just with a client an hour a week and they're having huge problems and there's a lot of things in their environment that needs to change, and these things are not going to be changing quickly, right? Then it kind of makes sense, that they be on a medication. And a lot of people aren't going to like me saying this, because we're talking about like, hey, but I don't see the medication as a replace for behavior analysis. It's like you
right.
still need the behavior analysis there, because you want to get off the medication. You don't want to just keep on taking the medication. The medication just makes things you all right with it. It just makes
Mm,
things you all right. It makes you all right with the terrible things that are going on around you. But ultimately, like my job as a therapist is like, hey, let's change these terrible things that are going on around you. And then you're going to feel a whole lot better, because it makes sense that you feel depressed or you feel anxious because you have this crap going on in your life. So let's change the crap going on in your life instead of trying to change the feeling or deal with the feeling. And even though it's the long term solution and might take longer than just taking a pill. And then when they take that pill, I tell them that like, hey, it just makes you okay with those terrible things going on in your life. It's not changing them. We got to do the work to change them. Like we
mm,
still need the behavior analysis to change those things. We won't get it from the pill. The pill is going to keep things okay just for now.
yeah.
Just for now, or for as long as you keep on, even not even for as long as you keep on taking it. Really, just for now.
Do you think it's is it possible for you to look at the therapeutic effects of a medication, or sort of see a client maybe experiencing those versus side effects, and is there any level of positive or negative reinforcement that you think we as part of the environment could add to that? What are your thoughts on that? So I mean, if somebody
Oh
you
well,
can tell they're feeling better and is saying that of any assistance, for example.
I'll give you the opposite of example in a
Okay.
counter therapeutic situation where like, yeah, this client, like I see twice a week. She wasn't going to have a med check for another month. She's taking this antidepressant, and it's like she's like falling asleep during the day.
Ooh.
She can't sleep at night, and she's like having the worst time. And like I don't even know if her sleep is like, if she's really getting sleep. I think her sleep was disrupted too, and then she's having suicidal thoughts, and I'm like, oh,
Ah.
you gotta stop taking it. And she's like not even realizing it's a medication. I'm like, this, you weren't like this like, a few weeks ago.
Wow.
It takes a
Okay.
while for this medication to like build up in your system. Now that it's built up, you're having all kinds of problems. So like you got to stop taking it. And, just because like, hey, if it increases your suicidal thoughts and your doctor says, stop taking it. If it increases your suicidal thoughts, then stop taking it.
Yeah.
So that's happened before, but also like, it is interesting in tracking, like, with the schizophrenics, like tracking their delusions. How
Hmm.
many did they have this session? And then how many are they having while they're on medication? And then seeing that like, oh yeah, there's a big decrease, and they're just, I don't know if they're just not having delusions or they're not talking about delusions, but if they have them, they'll talk about them. And so it seems like they're just not that interested, or not, not relating so much, I guess, on that
Yeah.
delusion.
That's interesting, and that makes me feel better about what I've told parents in the past about medication. Is that, like you said, medication isn't necessarily the long-term answer. If the individual's if like overly stimulated, is there a way for us to help this individual calm down so they can access their environment, in which then the medication kind of fades away as the environment takes over? But if they're so stimulated they're not able to access their environment, well, maybe there needs to be some intervention there to allow them to access their environment. Or what you're saying on the flip side of things, if this individual's accessing their environment in a way that's traumatizing or overwhelming for them, is there a way for us to blunt that for a period of time so that we can change the environment to then fade down the medication? Is that kind of accurate to what you were saying, Dr. Scott?
Some of the plans we make and changing their, people's lives, the things around them. Like, I have some clients, a lot of my clients are medical assistants. So some of them are in bad spots and trying to get out of them, like in shelters, and don't have jobs, or maybe just got out of jail or something like that. And it's like, yeah, you could do the woe is me approach, and just feel bad about yourself, and be, and be miserable and be a terrible person. Or like, if you want these things to change, then like, we're working on getting a job, and we're working on getting you out of the shelter. But how long does that take? That's going to take some time. And how much are we going to get done in an hour a week? When part of the time is like, you get your chance to gripe. If you need to gripe about things, that's your right in therapy, to gripe about things you're not happy about. And that gives me an idea, like, oh, here are socially valid targets, things that like they're griping about it. So they want these things to change. But yeah, it doesn't matter like how good of a therapist you are. You might not be able to get someone who just got out of jail, like a job, like, and is in a shelter, just got out of jail, and a job overnight. And then it might take months. It might take months, and you have to keep them applying and working. You can't do it for them. You got to keep them doing it. So they got to keep on applying and then failing, right? So we're talking about being on really thin schedules of reinforcement. So it kind of makes sense, like a medication during this time might help them. And I've seen that where people were on medication and then like got out of that spot, and then, didn't have to take it anymore after that, because like, yeah, the things around them changed, and they were doing better. So they didn't have to take the medication anymore.
Tremendous amount of response effort to very thin reinforcement. I think
Yeah.
that's really important. That speaks to a lot of other topics that we could probably apply that same concept to, where people are. I mean, you're almost training or implementing a behavior of endurance. It's a little abstract, but that's what you're asking these people to do, is to endure a whole lot of really tough circumstances,
Hmm.
for a real glimmer of hope. It has to feel amazing when you see somebody get there, and I'm assuming that happens more often than not. Hopefully,
Oh man, it does, and I don't get to talk about it because you can't talk, which is
yeah,
the toughest thing. You got to keep, people, their personal information
sure,
private,
sure.
and and
Oh
confidential and
wow,
stuff like that. But it's like really, yeah, it's really rewarding when you get the text like, oh yeah, it was all because of you, and like,
oh
I'm doing
man,
so
I
much
can't even
better
imagine.
now, and yeah, like it's yeah. People
Good
turning
for you,
people's
man.
lives around is cool. It's fun. And then it's like, and you wish you could do that for everybody. And it's just, sometimes you just can't, and you want it, but you also got to understand that you can't be like dragging people along by the hand. They have to be climbing their own ladders. You can't be dragging them up the ladder, so it's like, that's the thing. I got to get you climbing. I got to get you do it.
Yeah.
Really, really teach you to help yourself as much as possible.
Well,
So,
that payoff for you. Oh,
go ahead.
that payoff for you has got to be so important too, because you were talking about response effort for payoff. Like, your job has a huge amount of response effort. You come and have to listen to all of this negativity, which I'm sure wears on you after a while of just hearing all of this negativity and things people are going through. And I'm sure it's hard to decompartmentalize that outside of your work and not think about, is this person going to be okay, which is taking a strain on your, mental well-being. So getting those payoffs of my life has changed now as a result. I mean, obviously there's a monetary payoff, but none of us get into this field surely because of the monetary payoff.
Yeah, right.
Really?
It's yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's why I'm in it. What are you talking about, man?
But that payoff has to be just so amazing and reinforcing for you.
It is, but like, have you done the act therapy, Dan?
No.
No, which was going to
Okay.
be my question, and I want to open that up to you. Go ahead.
All right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I tell my clients this. I wouldn't do any therapy on you that I haven't tried on myself first.
Hmm.
Right. So like, I definitely like, do the act therapy on myself. So like, yeah, they're complaining. I don't interact with it like that. I gotta hear this all day and this is some horrible thing, and like that it
Hmm.
accumulates some kind of burden on me or anything like that. No, I'm just trying to help people,
So
and
what
just
does
want
that act
to,
therapy look like when you say you do it on yourself? Can you describe it? Because I'm still very new in it. I'm not really understanding. So can you describe it for our listeners?
yeah, it looked like just like that. Like I just was just telling you, like I don't, yeah, like I'm in it for like I'm in it to help people. That's my value, right? That's an important thing. All right,
Okay.
so I guess I'll give you this this analogy. I'll give you the ladder analogy, right? And this is like part of analogy. This is the later part of an analogy. But we have these values, and these values are if you're looking at it through a Skinnerian lens, this is our rule governed behavior, right?
Okay.
That we conform, and we conform it in a couple of different ways, tracking, right? We are paying attention to the environment and we're making rules off the environment, right? So like, so this person was mean to me, this person always going to be mean to me. Right. And then we have plies, which are, certainly important culturally. Like, mom always told me if I don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. Right. So there might be like those things, and they call them plies because we're complying,
Hmm.
to that rule. And for the most part, like our values are plies. And these thoughts that like for mine, it's going to be I want to be a good behavior scientist, and I want to be a good father, and I want to be a good husband, and a good son and brother, and I want to be it's not I want to be good at pool. It's I want to be fantastic at pool, because I'm already good. So like that's kind of shifted up, and I want to be a good golfer and good at playing guitar, and those are important
Nice.
things. But there's never going to be a day where I say, "Oh, I'm a good behavior analyst. I'm done. I'm done." Like I don't have to do it anymore. No, I'm always striving for it. And that's the thing with our values. Is like those are the things we're always striving for. So, when I think of a ladder, and I really like ladders. I don't climb ladders all day. Just like the idea, the concept of the ladders. And I think about how the ladders have these big, long sides, big, thick sides, easy for you to grasp onto. And they go really far up. They carry you all the way up, right? And these ladders remind me of our values, how they both kind of go up. They're both going up in the same direction, because our values aren't going to, intertwine or like conflict with each other. They're consistent, and they're easy for us to hold. But then I think about the rungs, and the rungs are the most important parts for a behavior analyst, because the rungs, they cannot be too close together. Otherwise, we can't fit our feet in between them. But the rungs can also not be too far apart, because how are we going to get a 20-foot ladder that has two rungs on it? Dan, what would happen if you tried to climb a 20-foot ladder with two rungs?
Even with my height, I would fall down and bust my butt.
Right. So, and the rungs are like the goals, right? And so we know that as behavior analysts, if we put these goals too close together, then our clients aren't going to be able to do them. But if we make these goals too big and too far apart, then they're not going to be able to climb up that ladder either. They have to be able to see that next step and be able to grab onto it and pull themselves up. And I tell my clients that while they're climbing that ladder, do not look for a rope. A rope is something someone might, hand down to you and say, "Hey, I'll help you. I'll pull you up." Right. And I tell them that because um, if they grab onto that rope, then they're not climbing their own ladder. Someone else is doing it for them.
Hmm.
Someone else is pulling them up. And then someone else, they might be pulling on this rope and be like, "Oh, this rope is really heavy." And then be like, "Whoa, well, there's my own ladder. Let me climb my own ladder." And then what do they do with the rope? They just let it go, and then that person is back down at the bottom of the hole. And then sometimes people will toss them up a rope from the bottom of the hole, and you know where that rope is going. It's not going up, right? So
Yeah.
I coach people that like, hey, stay on your ladder. You know what's important to you. We'll come up with some goals for you to accomplish what's important to you and you to make progress. And yeah, you might look over and be like really impressed with how high someone else has climbed. But most importantly, stay on your own ladder and don't let anyone help you. I'll be on my own ladder cheering you on from over here. Like, keep on going. I'm cheering you on. But ultimately, I'm climbing my own ladder too. Right. So don't grab for a loaf. Help yourself. Stay on your own ladder and let's keep on making progress in a direction that we want to go that will make us happy in the long run.
I'm
Wow,
gonna cut
man.
that clip and use that for training at Ascend.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Gentlemen, we are exactly on time. We could
Oh,
probably
really?
we could
Wow.
probably continue to. I mean, literally, like the end of your lovely analogy there put us right at the end. We're gonna have to do this again, please. So we'll reach back out to you.
So many more things we want to talk
so
about.
many more things to talk about. It has been a tremendous honor, Dr. Scott, to have you on the show.
Thanks.
We learned so much and so many more things that I want to ask. We'll do our research before the next one so we can revisit some of these topics. Yeah, real pleasure to have you on and to share your wealth of knowledge with our listeners. Any closing thoughts, Dan, before I give my little wrap up?
Well, Dr. Scott, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything that you would like to add? Any place that we can direct listeners to?
Oh, yeah.
Any closing thoughts from?
Well,
From
there's the one thing you guys didn't talk about that movement that's going on now. I don't know if you guys are like, I know you haven't been on LinkedIn as much. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Please, no. We
I'm
may
not on
know.
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had maybe complained a little bit about the BACB and then
Okay.
on LinkedIn, and some people kind of felt the same way, and I guess people were kind of feeling that the BACB is really like has been very focused in autism, and then there's some of us
I would say
that
that's
do
true.
behavior analysis outside of autism, and and needs a voice, because the people who do it outside of autism are trying to say like, hey, we could do really important work here, and like, and there should be jobs for us, but there's not. It's all the focus is in autism, and like, or do we really have a voice? And a lot of
Cool.
people wanted to create a new board, and I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. But I know, but we've been meeting, and there's been a lot of important, significant people in the field that have been interested in this and kind of pushing for it. I'm just kind of riding the wave right now. But I don't know. You guys didn't. You guys are like looking at me like it's the strangest thing
No, no,
in the
no,
world.
no, not at all. I mean, I think that you're talking about something very important. I've delved into that topic very minimally, and also with a very related venture. So the idea of behavioral pediatrics as a developmental guy, that was sort of my soapbox in saying, I mean, this has more applications than just autism. So I mean, yeah, the idea of if somebody can't uh, integrate the idea of doing your own thing makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad you brought it up because we don't have to stop now. We've got plenty of time to discuss it a little further. So what are the next steps? Where do you think this is going? What kind of feedback have you gotten? What's next?
Right now is just meetings. We're meeting again,
Okay.
and actually 2 Sundays from now we'll be meeting again, and we're having meetings more frequently now. So momentum is kind of picking up, and I was just complaining about the BACP a little bit. Like,
Sure.
I didn't think that there was going to be a lot of other people out there that were like, hey, yeah, we need this. We do kind of need something, and I guess it was kind of born from the whole. Not everybody feels comfortable with some of the ethics the BACB has with operating in other areas, and we kind of feel that like our that some of the things we learn in our science are applicable to behavior outside of autism, not just applicable to autism. So,
Absolutely.
so when they say you need like all this, education and training and this and that, and like some of the other areas, some of us just don't see it that way. I'm used to using it in whatever area I want to apply it to, without regard to like, oh, I have to get a mentor or supervisor or something like that. And sometimes that's just not possible. I don't know anyone who's
Right.
doing behavior analysis and billiards, or like and anyone who's
Yeah.
really interested in using behavior analysis in their community and like, and politically. Who am I going to look up to? But you know what? I don't even want to. I don't even think it makes any
Yeah.
sense to. I think it would be bad for science to also, because that means getting someone else's idea and kind of going along with their own application instead of saying like I'm very strong with my fundamental knowledge of these methods, and I can take these methods and I can apply it to any human behavior or
Sure.
animal behavior, sometimes too, that I don't need to have like, a special someone supervise me that has a lot of experience in this area or a lot of education in this area. And it might even be bad too, because that would be both of us, translating, really me going off of his translating instead of me translating it from the original text,
Right.
from that original thing. And I think that's kind of like what has happened in sports too, and why it's kind of become like a little more biomechanical for behavior analysts instead of like more functional. And it's because like, yeah, they're like, look at how much work has come out of Florida from Miltonberger, and they did a lot of dance stuff, and it makes sense for that, but does it make sense for a sport like golf?
Mm.
And it's like, no, that's not even our goal. And plus, there's people out there that do it better than us, and also like, hey, there's some metrics that they're interested in that have nothing to do with swing mechanics or anything like that. Then those should be the metrics we're most interested in. Maybe how close you get it to the hole, not like how big your backswing is. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Right.
So like, and ultimately, like we see this as selectionists. So we're selecting, some of these topographies too. So if we just worry about schedules of reinforcement, like on the variables that are most important to the golfers, then it will take everything else will take care of it itself. Or you have some other people like that are there to do it. So I guess like in totality, it's like, yeah, we need to have behavior analysis for everybody else,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like including start using it on yourself. And I encourage you guys to do so.
You got me.
Live a behavioral life. Like I don't know, 20 standard acceleration charts going. I think I spend like maybe I don't even think I spend 5 minutes a week on them. Because it's like I'm just putting a dot on a piece of paper. Like you could do the same. You could spend 5 minutes a week and have 20 standard acceleration charts and like accelerate 20 of your behaviors. You know what I mean? But like,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
you have those skills to do so. Like, why can't we just go do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow,
I
that
like
is,
that.
and the biomechanics of a golf swing are really interesting because you bring that up. So if we're focused on that and somebody's teaching us how to play golf, by virtue of us focusing on that, that person's going to be teaching us through their biomechanics and what worked for them, and then attributing that to us and saying, well, the way that we need to hit this, like you said, because you hit it better with your backswing being like this, I'm going to say that you need to do that and teach it through that premise. That's really
Right,
interesting versus focusing on the function.
You all meet on Zoom or live
Yeah.
or a hybrid? How do you?
We've been meeting on Zoom
So maybe
recently.
we could do a. I mean, if we could set up one of your meetings as a show.
Okay, that'd be cool.
So
Yeah, that'd be
let's
cool.
check back in on that. I mean, that might be a really good way to just get
It is.
the entire
It is
premise
really,
out there. So
yeah, it is really interesting. And the way it's going right now, like, all right, so we're in the early phases, and like we adopted Robert's Rules of Order. I don't know if you guys have been in organizations on boards or anything like
no,
that.
no,
Like, no, well, so
not
when
yet.
you like, if you get active and you get into activism, then you might get on nonprofits and Robert's Rules of Order are like rules for a democracy. So
Okay.
so everybody has a say. No one can talk a second time before like or no one can talk a second time before someone else has talked once. And then we go through like like, oh, I motion to do this, or I move to have this done, or like I move to substitute this verbiage, and we're creating bylaws, and we're creating purposes of this organization and committees and just like what everybody does, and everybody's involved from the get-go. It's like really is like kind of like a democratic behaviorist board, like where it's not just Jim Carr doing it. It's
Right.
like it's
Right.
not Jim Carr's say, it's like everybody's say. And I think it's different, and like just seeing things getting put together like they are now, where like everybody's involved, and it's not like just me coming up with these ideas and we're all voting on it and stuff like that. It's neat
That
to see
sounds
how
great.
it.
Where do people find this resource? How do people get involved?
All right, so this just started. This movement just started on LinkedIn.
Okay,
And
LinkedIn.
you can find me on LinkedIn. I would be a good follow on LinkedIn anyway, because I do
Cool.
talk about behavior analysis a good amount. Just out of the blue, I'll just say like, I'm thinking about this today, or I'm thinking about how this applies to this, just like, it's like a sounding board for me. And also it's a great area to network with behavior analysts. There's a lot of them on there. And a lot of marketing people, they say behavior analysis has a marketing problem. I disagree. I think that because all these marketing people do is they send me DMs and I don't want to talk to anyone.
Right.
So I don't think
That's why
I don't think we have a marketing
That's why I've stayed
problem.
off LinkedIn, but now you're inspiring me to go back on. I will find you for sure.
And
get that
we will add his LinkedIn into the description as well.
Yeah, if that's
Okay.
okay with you. I'm glad
Yeah.
we took that extra time to talk about this. Let's certainly check back in. We'd like to get involved.
He hit us with that bombshell at the end of the episode.
He's been waiting. He's been sitting on it.
I
this
know,
entire
man.
time.
Okay, well now we
I
know what
thought,
our next episode will be about.
Well, Suzanne knows about it. I'm surprised she didn't prompt you guys to be
All
like,
right.
hey, talk to him about this.
Okay, no, we. I mean, I think it would make sense for us to get involved as well, even just as business owners in the autism intervention piece. We are looking for other ways to utilize our skill set and provide different services. So even if it's related and still working with families, the idea that we're taking it outside the scope of autism treatment, I think is a very, very needed movement for sure. So. Man, Dr. Scott, we're going to have you back on. This is a great connection. It's a real pleasure to meet you. I like
Nice
to end.
meeting you guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll make sure to include the relevant links. I know Suzanne's good at finding those. Make sure those are part of the show description, and we'll find a very good excuse to have you back on soon or connect with your group. Little wrap up for us. I'm going to say climb your own ladder, live a behavioral life, and
Always analyze responsibly.
cheers, Dr. Scott.
Oh,
Thanks a lot, man.
Can I say I feel nice and refreshed?
Please.
Like I just had a nice cold one
Yeah,
after
please.
this talk. Yeah.
All right, on,
Yeah,
man.
Thank
that
you
way.
so much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
See you guys. Thank you.
ABA on Tap is recorded live and unfiltered. We're done for today. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. See you next time.